Andretti is one of motorsport's most synonymous names. This family has been there and done it all when it comes to racing. As far as Andretti Autosport is concerned, the team has 5 IndyCar titles, 6 Indy 500 victories, a Bathurst 1000 victory, compete in Formula E with success to boot, compete in Extreme E, several steps of the Road to Indy ladder, and IMSA, along with their recent partnership with Wayne Taylor Racing. As a team, they've been a conqueror of global motorsport. However, Andretti has wanted an entry into F1 for a long time, and in its latest attempt to get an entry, they'll be partnering up with none other than General Motors and its Cadillac brand. If the teams have been asking Michael Andretti for more reasons to want his team an entry, well, he's answered them. Not only had he got a manufacturer, he'd got one of America's and indeed the world's biggest car companies on board. Plus, the intent was there for Cadillac to have at least some part to play in making an engine. What more does this person need to do? The uproar from this announcement by the fans was plain to see. For some people, it was almost as if all their birthdays and Christmases had come at once. Unfortunately though, this still doesn't seem to be enough for most of the existing 10 teams in Formula 1. This is where I start to get frustrated. For a while, whilst I really wanted Andretti to enter F1, I, as a fan of motorsport, accepted with a certain level of begrudgment that the teams were more than entitled to think about themselves when it came to finances. I mean, realistically, who wouldn't? If you're put in a position where the return on your investment was likely going to be less if a certain action happened, then it's completely understandable if you're apprehensive about letting what would be in this case, Andretti entering as an 11th team, happening. However, this is the point where I have to say, if this Andretti Cadillac entry isn't worthy enough of entering F1 as an 11th team, then nobody is. And unless something changes in the entry requirements, then nothing ever will, or perhaps even should be. If the majority of the existing 10 teams don't want anybody in, then I'd rather them be honest and just be upfront and say, we do not want any more teams entering F1 for the foreseeable future. Because to me, when you read all of the information regards Andretti's F1 bid, and all the positive implications as a fan you think they could have on the sport, it's just making all of the lukewarm reactions to the entry seem incredibly demoralising. Then there's been some of the rumblings that have been going around in the media. One in particular by the BBC caught my eye. In essence, it seems as though people in the F1 fraternity think that race teams based in America don't entirely understand what sort of level and infrastructure is required to compete in F1, especially how in the US, series like IndyCar and NASCAR use parts that are universal across all teams. I'm sorry, but if that is indeed true, then that is sheer lunacy. I think the US teams are well aware of the factors that go into making a competent Formula 1 team. Also, what does that say about Haas? The team's racing portfolio before F1 was in NASCAR, and whilst the team has without doubt been successful in NASCAR, it seems as though by the take that is rumoured to be making the rounds, Haas would not be a team that would know how to make a successful F1 team out of itself. Now, whilst people have made jokes about them, the reality is, they have been for most of its seasons competing in the series as a fairly solid midfield team. So this potential notion that American teams don't know what it takes to be competitive in F1 is rather puzzling to say the least. Also, as McLaren found out in 2019 at the Indy 500, US racing may be of a more spec car nature, doesn't mean though it's straightforward. Then there's an angle that I look at, which is, how do you know whether a team will crash and burn? We've had instances where privateer efforts with no massive manufacturer alignment have done really well, such as Jordan. Yes, I know that was a different era as well as a team not being based in the US, but the point still stands. And then you have manufacturers such as Toyota and Jaguar, under the ownership of Ford, that never showed race-winning cars and performances, and were just sort of there. Also, who really gave Haas a chance when they entered F1, and they blew everybody's expectations away at the first race. The truth is, whether the Andretti entry was going to be a buyout of Sauber, a team solely under Andretti's leadership, or an Andretti with manufacturer ties, you're not going to get an entirely clear picture of whether they will be successful or not. Also, what is successful? Being only a lap down at the end of the race? Competing in the midfield? Or regularly challenging for victories and championships? The only way to truly find out is by how they would perform across a season. Albeit this isn't only an Andretti issue, that goes for any other new proposed teams. One other thing that I disagree with is why a lot of people in F1 on the face of it are upset at how openly Andretti are going about their proposed F1 entry. For me, I think why shouldn't they? Why isn't a proposed entry not really meant to openly announce its intentions? One of the other proposed new teams is called Panthera Team Asia. They have been open in the sense that we have had interviews with people associated with that project for a couple of years now, potentially even before discussions of Andretti entering F1 via Sauber came to light. Admittedly, new information about them hasn't come out very often, but they haven't zipped their mouths about it. Yet the interest from racing fans doesn't seem quite as large for Panthera as it does for Andretti. The reason more than likely is that Andretti was pretty confident that when news of a potential Andretti effort in F1 came to light, the public reaction would be huge. What followed was exactly that. Andretti has managed to get a hefty chunk of support from the F1 fanbase by being frank about the proposition. For me though, the puzzling thing I find in all of this is that don't people in F1 think that somebody would leak a story of Andretti wanting to enter F1 and that it would eventually come to light? I mean, stories come out in F1 or indeed any motorsport series on a fairly regular basis, with scoops from insider sources from people who may be in the know of stories such as potential silly season moves, engine changes, any content or discontent within teams. So to think that, especially given how Andretti is involved in several different motorsport categories these days, I find it hard to fathom that somebody wouldn't get a scoop on an Andretti Formula 1 entry at some point. Once that story comes out into the public domain, it will more than likely cause a similar public response, with most of the fanbase being very supportive of the proposal. I realise that the current 10 F1 teams will always base almost all their decisions on what is in their interests, hence why Alpine and McLaren have no public issues about the proposal, because for one, Andretti is a lifelong friend and business partner with Zak Brown, and for the other, Andretti is who they'll be supplying engines to, which gives them more real-time data to further improve the Renault power unit. However, for the other teams, there is no initial incentive to want to let Andretti in, and they in turn can't be 100% sure that Andretti and the positive impact that they'll have on F1 will be enough to offset what they could lose if Andretti enters into the Concord Agreement. The teams have every right to do this. I don't blame them for having that mindset. However, if Andretti Cadillac is not worthy enough of entering Formula 1, then what's the point in allowing new teams to enter in the first place? All it's doing is dangling the tastiest carrot in front of all the fans, only to be thrown into a blender. It will just cause negativity. So either let Andretti in, or just flat out say, no more new teams. That though is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. What do you think about the Andretti F1 debacle going on at the moment? Do you agree with me, or am I barking up the completely wrong tree? Say your thoughts in the comment section. However, until the next video, enjoy the rest of your day.